I was thinking about this the other day. Usually when we talk about a problem, um, say a medical diagnosis or even just a mechanical failure in your car, there is this really deep-seated expectation of precision.
Oh, absolutely. We expect things to be binary.
Right. It's like engineering. If you break your arm, you go in, they take an x-ray, and it shows that stark, jagged white line across the bone. And the doctor just, points a pen at the screen and says, there it is. There's the problem.
Right. It's either broken or it is not. The system is functioning or it has failed. There's no real in between.
Exactly. And honestly, there's a strange comfort in that. I think we as humans just desperately like things to be visible. We like our problems to be easily categorized, maybe put into a neat little box with a label on it, and then we just want to be handed a highly specific step-by-step instruction manual for fixing it.
But the reality is that the vast majority of the complex systems we interact with every single day simply do not operate on that level of binary clarity.
Yeah, they really don't. I mean, you step out of the hospital and into the world of sociology or psychology or community building or, and this is a big one, especially organized religion, and suddenly that pristine x-ray machine is completely useless.
It's worse than useless. Yeah, it
Yeah.
gives you a false sense of security.
Totally. You are looking at a landscape that is incredibly murky. You've got, what, thousands of years of history, competing philosophies, massive institutional politics, human trauma, and all these cultural shifts just layered on top of each other.
Right.
Trying to find the quote-unquote broken bone in a society is almost impossible.
Because you aren't just looking at a single static structure anymore. You are looking at an organism,
Huh.
one that has mutated, adapted, and been patched over continuously for centuries.
Yeah.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Muddy waters. That's exactly it. Now, to you, the listener, and it doesn't matter if you are a student of history, someone deeply invested in the mechanics of community building, or honestly, just someone who looks around to the modern world, feels a sense of profound isolation and wonders how we fix it, I really want you to hold on to that feeling of looking at a complex, murky system.
It's a vital framing for what we're doing today.
It is. Because today we are taking a deep dive into a very specific attempt to solve that exact problem. But we aren't looking at like a minor tweak or some new political policy.
Not at all.
No. I want you to imagine, just for a second, walking up to the massive, convoluted, thousands of years old mainframe of modern organized religion and just hovering your finger over a giant red factory reset button.
A factory reset. That is a highly evocative visual and frankly a deeply disruptive concept.
Just picture the implications of actually pressing it. You are stripping away thousands of years of human commentary. You are deleting the accumulated politics.
Yeah.
You are wiping out the institutional bloat, all the endless committees, the historical baggage.
All those layers that get added on century after century by people who genuinely thought they were improving the system.
Right. What actually happens if you wipe all of that out and reboot the machine using only the absolute original baseline code? What does the interface even look like then?
And that is the incredibly ambitious central question posed by the stack of sources we are going to explore in this deep dive. We are looking at a comprehensive blueprint for a movement called BABASHUVA.
BABASHUVA. And I have to say, just holding these documents, looking at the visual branding they've put together, you instantly get the sense that this is not, it's not a casual weekend seminar.
No, the aesthetics are very deliberate.
The logo alone sets a wildly intense tone. It's this stark, vibrant red circle, and depending on how you look at it, it's either a rising sun burning through the fog, or maybe a brand new molten globe just forming.
Both interpretations signify a radical genesis.
Yeah, and it's surrounded by the word BABASHUVA in these massive, heavy letters. But it is the tagline that actually stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, the tagline is fascinating.
Right beneath that red circle, it just says, a new world, a new reality.
It is a sweeping declaration of intent. I mean, they're not proposing a minor reformation here or a gentle update to existing traditions.
No, a new reality implies that the current reality is fundamentally broken and needs to be entirely overwritten.
Exactly.
So our mission today is to unpack how exactly BABASHUVA plans to engineer this new reality. They call their core operating philosophy divine spiritual humanism.
Which is a phrase we'll definitely need to deconstruct.
Oh, we will. And as we go through this, we're going to explore how they attempt to fuse something that sounds incredibly ancient and rigid-like, an absolute uncompromising adherence to biblical laws, with community actions that read as surprisingly, almost shockingly, modern.
The contrast is jarring, frankly.
It really is. I mean, we're going to be talking about a theology that mandates ancient dietary laws in one breath and then mandates physical trauma support for asylum seekers, interfaith dialogue, and mindfulness apps in the next.
It is a synthesis that immediately creates friction in the mind. The contemporary listener is simply not conditioned to see those concepts living peacefully in the same document.
Not at all. We tend to segregate the ancient and the progressive into completely different cultural silos,
Precisely.
which is exactly why I'm so obsessed with this material right now.
Yeah,
The paradox here gives you intellectual whiplash.
I can imagine.
As I was reading through these manifestos and their educational plans, I felt like I was simultaneously standing in the middle of a desert 3,000 years ago and sitting in a sleek tech startup office in 2026.
It is attempting to build a bridge across millennia without compromising either side of the river.
That's a great way to put it. So, to understand how they attempt to construct that bridge, we have to start at the absolute bedrock.
Right. Before we can evaluate their community gardens or their digital applications, we really have to understand the fundamental mechanics of their worldview.
Yeah, we have to look at why they believe a new reality is required in the first place and what they consider to be the source code for that reality.
Let's start right there with the underlying software architecture, so to speak. If we look at the foundational premise of the BABASHUVA project, their central thesis is a hard, unyielding return to the absolute roots of the Jewish Bible.
Okay?
They are advocating for the strict observance of the mitzvot, the commandments, but specifically and exclusively according to what they call the Torah of Moses.
And we need to pause on that exact phrasing, don't we? Because Torah of Moses is not just a casual historical descriptor here.
No, it is the definitive boundary line they are drawing in the sand. It is their anchor point.
Right. And here is where the friction really starts.
Right.
There is a specific line in their foundational text that I just kept rereading. They explicitly advocate living by this divine law rather than by, and I'm quoting directly here, the teachings of man as is customary today.
Rather than the teachings of man as is customary today. That is a fascinating, highly loaded sentence.
It's huge.
It is a profound, albeit politely worded, critique of the entire current religious and cultural establishment.
It is a total indictment. Let's lean into the software analogy we started with, because I think it's the only way to really visualize what they are attempting.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine a piece of open source software that was released 3,000 years ago. The original developer launched version 1.0. But over the centuries, millions of users have downloaded it. They've all added their own code.
Right, feature creep.
Exactly. One generation adds a patch to make it work better in Europe. Another generation writes a mod to deal with modern finance. You get rabbinical commentary layered on top of historical tradition, layered on top of cultural assimilation.
Until eventually the system is groaning under the weight of its own code.
Exactly.
It becomes slow, buggy, and prone to crashing because there are simply too many contradictory instructions running simultaneously.
Yes. And the standard response from most modern religious movements is to just write another patch. Let's update the interface, or let's delete this one specific line of code that we don't like anymore.
But BABASHUVA rejects that approach.
Completely. BABASHUVA is looking at the mainframe and saying, no. This system is too corrupted by human intervention. You cannot patch this.
They want the factory reset.
Right. They are saying we have to wipe the hard drive completely clean and reinstall the raw, unedited version 1.0. That is what they mean by rejecting the teachings of man. They want to eliminate the static of human interpretation.
It's a bold claim.
It is, but I have to hit pause here because I am genuinely stuck on a massive logical pothole with this whole concept.
What's the pothole?
Well, I get the desire for a clean system, but isn't any interpretation inherently human?
Ah, yes.
Right. The moment a human being with a brain and a cultural background reads a text, even an ancient one, they're interpreting it.
That is the nature of reading, yes.
So how on earth does BABASHUVA claim to bypass human teaching while simultaneously writing their own manifestos, designing their own educational courses, and telling people how to live?
It's a very fair question.
Isn't a BABASHUVA workshop inherently just another teaching of man? How are they not just installing their own personal software mod and calling it original?
That is the ultimate, unavoidable paradox of any restorationist movement, and it is exactly where we need to apply pressure. How do you instruct someone to reject human instruction without your own instruction becoming the very thing you are rallying against?
Exactly. It feels like a snake eating its own tail.
It does. But what is mechanically fascinating here is how the BABASHUVA literature maneuvers around this trap.
How do they do it?
Well, they do not claim to be the recipients of some new overriding divine revelation. They aren't saying, God spoke to us yesterday and told us the old guys were wrong.
Right.
Instead, they position their entire project not as a new doctrine, but as a methodology.
A methodology. Okay. Explain how that works in practice.
Think of it like teaching someone to use a telescope. Traditional teachings of man, in their view, is like someone looking through a telescope at the moon, painting a picture of what they see, and then handing you the painting and saying, this is what the moon looks like. Study the painting.
Okay, I'm tracking.
You are learning about the moon through their interpretation, their brushstrokes, their perspective.
And over time, people start arguing about the painting instead of looking at the actual moon.
Precisely. BABASHUVA claims that their materials are not a new painting. They claim their materials are simply instructions on how to calibrate your own telescope so you can look at the moon directly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They are offering tools, linguistic, historical, and behavioral tools to help the individual encounter the text without the traditional intermediary layers. Their goal isn't to dictate a rigid, heavily doctrinal meaning, but to create a specific framework where the raw text can act directly upon the individual.
And that framework is what they call divine spiritual humanism, which, by the way, is another phrase that immediately creates friction for me.
It is very distinctive.
A new reality through divine spiritual humanism. When I first read that, my brain just kind of rejected it. It feels like a complete oxymoron.
It is highly jarring to the modern ear, certainly.
Right.
If we look at the intellectual history of the 20th and 21st centuries, the word humanism is almost exclusively utilized as a secular philosophy.
Yeah, traditional secular humanism places humanity firmly at the absolute center of the universe.
Exactly.
Secular humanism is essentially the philosophy of we are all we have. It suggests that human beings are the ultimate measure of all things. We don't need to look up to the sky for salvation or morality.
We can solve our own problems through the application of human reason, scientific inquiry, and a shared rational ethics.
It is fundamentally horizontal.
Yes. It relies on the premise that human nature is capable of perfecting itself. But BABASHUVA takes that highly recognizable word, humanism, and completely rewires it.
They really do.
By forcefully tethering it to the concepts of divine and spiritual, they are making a profoundly aggressive theological claim.
They are basically hijacking a secular term to make a religious point.
They are arguing that you cannot actually achieve true humanity. You cannot reach your ultimate optimized human potential without a direct, unmediated connection to a divine source.
Wow. So they're taking the core tenet of secular humanism, that placing humans at the center of everything elevates humanity. And they are saying, no, placing humans at the center actually degrades humanity.
That is the exact mechanism of their critique. They are suggesting that human ethics, when left entirely to human devices, will inevitably decay.
Why? Because it's subjective.
Because human reason is subjective. What seems perfectly rational and ethical to one culture in one century might be considered horrific by another culture a century later.
Yeah, that makes sense. History is full of that.
If humanity is the only benchmark, then morality is just a popularity contest. It's relative. And in BABASHUVA's view, that relativity is exactly what leads to the flawed teachings of man and the breakdown of society.
So in their view, true humanism, the ultimate valuing and protection of human life and dignity, is literally impossible unless it is anchored to a permanent, unchanging external divine standard.
That is their thesis.
You want to be fully human, you have to plug into the divine mainframe first. You cannot generate your own power.
And that theological stance is the engine for everything else they do.
Right.
If the Torah of Moses is the pure operating system and divine spiritual humanism is the framework, we now have to look at what happens when you boot the computer up.
What are the core applications? How does this philosophy actually direct human behavior on the ground?
Exactly. Because theory is great, but execution is what matters.
And the BABASHUVA texts do not leave this in the realm of abstract philosophy. They explicitly define 4 non-negotiable pillars. These are the behavioral outputs that are supposed to prove the system is actually working.
Let's examine the architecture of these pillars. The first one they list is love, or, in the original Hebrew terminology utilized throughout the text, ahava.
Ahava. And they are very specific about the mechanics of this love. It is a two-pronged approach. First, there is the vertical axis, loving God.
Yes.
The source specifically quotes Deuteronomy, commanding love for God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might.
And it is crucial to note how they define that love. It isn't just an ethereal, passive feeling of warmth.
No, it's very active.
The texts explicitly state that this love must translate into tangible action, engaging in daily prayers, rigorously studying the Torah, and keeping the mitzvot.
But the key differentiator here is the motivation, right?
Exactly. They demand that these actions be driven by a deep, internal sense of joy, appreciation, and respect for the ultimate source, rather than just a grim, rote sense of obligation. It must be an active, chosen love.
So that's the vertical. But then there's the second prong, the horizontal axis, loving the neighbor.
They pull directly from Leviticus here. Love your neighbor as yourself.
And the practical translation of this in the BABASHUVA materials is where it gets really demanding. It isn't just about, not harming people.
It goes much further than that.
It means actively wanting to see the good in everyone. It means acting for their benefit with the exact same urgency you would act for your own.
The examples they provide are highly instructive. They mandate helping others in times of physical or financial need and treating every single person with fundamental politeness and respect.
Which sounds standard, but there is a specific behavioral boundary they draw here that I find completely fascinating.
I know exactly the one you were talking about.
It's the mandate against criticism. The text explicitly demands a strict avoidance of non-constructive criticism and the judgment of others.
To elevate the avoidance of now constructive criticism to the level of a foundational religious pillar is a remarkable choice, especially given the context of the modern world.
Oh, absolutely.
We live in an era defined by the algorithmic amplification of outrage. Hypercriticism, snap judgments, and the public dismantling of others are essentially the primary currency of modern public discourse.
The internet literally runs on non-constructive criticism. If you take away judgment and outrage, half the platforms out there would just shut down. It's our favorite spectator sport.
It really is.
So for BABASHUVA to say, if you want to operate on the divine source code, you have to completely opt out of that behavior, that is a massively difficult, deliberate countercultural stance.
They are essentially saying that participating in the outrage machine is spiritually toxic. It corrupts the system.
It forces the individual to aggressively police their own internal dialogue before they even open their mouth or type a comment. It is a rigorous discipline.
It is.
Okay, so that is the first pillar. Love, vertically and horizontally, with the strict ban on toxic judgment. Let's move to pillar 2, which I think is where their philosophy really starts to show its teeth.
Yes. The Hebrew term is Kabbalat Ha'adam, which translates to the acceptance of humankind.
This pillar is constructed entirely upon the biblical concept of B'Tselem Elohim, which means being created in the image of God.
The text anchors this directly to the creation narrative in Genesis. And God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him.
And this is where I really want to dig in, because they pull absolutely no punches with how they apply this.
No, they do not.
They state that because every single person is created in the image of God, every person deserves profound respect and appreciation. And they do not leave any wiggle room here.
None at all.
The text explicitly states that this acceptance and these basic human rights must be granted, and again, quoting directly, regardless of origin, religion, gender, or social status.
We really need to pause and interrogate the friction here.
Yeah, please do.
Historically speaking, and even in the vast majority of contemporary religious contexts, a strict, uncompromising adherence to ancient fundamentalist laws is almost always associated with exclusivity.
Right. Usually the stricter you are about following the ancient rules, the smaller your tent gets. You start drawing really thick boundary lines.
Exactly. You build walls.
We are the pure ones who follow the law, and everyone else is outside. It usually leads to intense tribalism.
Exactly. Strict observance is usually the mechanism by which groups stratify people based on precisely the categories BABASHUVA lists: religion, gender, and origin.
But BABASHUVA is taking the most ancient foundational text, the genesis of humanity itself, and using it to mandate the widest possible tent.
It's a brilliant theological checkmate, really.
A checkmate. I like that. Explain why.
Well, by anchoring their entire definition of human value strictly in B'Tselem Elohim, they are logically forcing a universal inclusivity upon their followers.
Right.
If you genuinely believe that everyone bears the divine image, then discriminating against anyone based on where they were born, what they believe, or their gender is not just a social faux pas. It is fundamentally an act of blasphemy against the creator whose image they bear.
Wow. You cannot claim to love the artist while actively destroying or disrespecting the paintings they made.
Pers-
The logic traps you into being inclusive. If you want to follow the strict ancient lie, you have to accept the modern stranger.
And their operational mandate for this is very direct. The text calls for actively recognizing the basic rights of every person, actively encouraging equality and fairness in society, and explicitly demanding the creation of an inclusive and accepting environment for absolutely everyone.
So it's not just passive tolerance, it is active acceptance.
Active acceptance, yes.
Okay, that brings us to the final two pillars, which the texts link closely together. Compassion, which in Hebrew is chemla, and grace or kindness, which is cheesed.
These two are critical to differentiate.
Yeah, because if you were just glancing at this, compassion and grace sound like synonyms. They sound like the same warm, fuzzy feeling. But the texts delineate them in a really specific, mechanical way that is vital for understanding how they expect people to operate.
Yes, the distinction between the two is highly technical in their framework.
Let's break it down.
According to the BABASHUVA materials, compassion chemla is primarily an internal empathetic state. It is defined as the deep emotional ability to feel and identify with the suffering of another person.
The text actually highlights empathetic listening as a core component of this. It's about offering emotional support and mental help during difficult times.
Right.
So compassion is the internal radar. It is the ability to walk into a room, look at someone, and actually absorb the reality of what they're going through. It's feeling the weight of their situation.
Precisely. Chemla is the connective empathy. It is the shared human experience of pain. Now contrast that with the fourth pillar, cheesed, which translates to grace or kindness.
Okay.
In the BABASHUVA framework, cheesed is the external manifestation. It is defined as doing good for another person out of a generous heart, but it carries a very specific, demanding caveat.
The text says it must be done without expectation of reward.
Exactly. Zero return on investment.
None. If compassion is feeling the pain, cheesed is the unprompted, unconditional physical action taken to alleviate it, knowing you will get absolutely nothing in return.
The text lists giving physical charity, volunteering your time in the community, providing direct financial assistance, and offering sustained mental support as expressions of cheesed.
Okay, so compassion is feeling it, and grace is doing something about it, even when it costs you and benefits you in no way whatsoever.
That is the dynamic.
Now, I have to play the skeptic here.
Please do.
I am looking at these four pillars: love, acceptance regardless of background, compassion, and grace. And I have to admit, they sound incredible. It sounds like a beautiful way to live.
It is a highly ethical framework.
But honestly, if you took the word God out of the text, this sounds like the mission statement of literally every secular NGO, every global human rights charity, and every progressive corporate social responsibility program ever written in the last 10 years.
They are universally agreed upon good things, yes.
Right. So my question is, what makes this specifically anchored to the Jewish Bible? If their whole pitch is a return to the ancient source code, how is this not just them taking a trendy 21st century liberal worldview, slapping some Hebrew words on it, and calling it ancient?
That is a very sharp critique.
Are they really operating on ancient code, or are they just cherry-picking the parts of the Torah that happen to align with modern sensibilities?
That is the crucial stress test for this entire philosophy. And frankly, if they could not answer that question, the entire intellectual architecture of BABASHUVA would collapse.
So how do they answer it?
They anticipate this exact critique. They do not just present these four pillars as abstract, modern moral concepts floating in a vacuum. To prove that these are not just contemporary HR buzzwords pasted onto a religious document, they painstakingly anchor these behaviors to specific historical archetypes from the Torah.
Oh, so they use the actual ancient narratives as proof of concept.
Exactly. They're saying, you think this is a modern progressive idea? Let us show you how it was actually executed 3,000 years ago.
Okay, I like that.
They use these biblical figures not as historical trivia to memorize, but as literal, rigorous behavioral blueprints for how to act today.
Right, let's test that. The first archetype they bring out is Abraham, and they frame him as the ultimate master of hospitality.
The specific source narrative they cite here is Genesis chapter 18. This is a highly revealing story.
Set the scene for us.
Abraham is recovering from a physically traumatic procedure circumcision, and he is sitting at the entrance of his tent in the brutal, punishing heat of the desert day.
Not exactly a time you want visitors.
Not at all. Suddenly, he sees three mysterious strangers approaching from a distance.
And the BABASHUVA text focuses intently on his physical reaction here. He doesn't just stay seated and offer a polite nod.
No, the text is very specific about his movement.
Right. The biblical text notes that despite his physical pain, he literally runs to meet them. He bows down. He begs them to stop and rest.
He orders water to be brought to wash the dust off their feet.
He tells his wife, Sarah, to quickly bake fresh bread, and then he personally runs out to his herd, selects a choice calf, and has it prepared to feed them.
The BABASHUVA materials utilize this highly specific set of actions to teach the fundamental concept of giving warmly and generously from the heart, especially to individuals you do not know.
The text states, "The welcoming of guests with warmth and generosity is a central value that expresses love and grace toward every person."
It is the definition of radical, extreme hospitality. We have to think about the context. He had no idea who these people were.
They were just dusty, anonymous travelers walking through an incredibly hostile environment.
But he expended maximum physical effort and significant material resources just to comfort them. The text says Abraham teaches us to give from the whole heart, even to strangers.
And if we look closely, this is the perfect ancient execution of Pillar 2, acceptance of humankind.
Exactly. Abraham did not stop them at the edge of his camp and demand to know their religious origin, their political affiliation, or their social status before offering them his best calf.
He saw human beings, creatures bearing the divine image, in need of sustenance in the desert, and he immediately initiated cheese. He took unprompted action.
Okay, that's Abraham. The second archetype they lean on is Moses, and they frame him as the moral leader.
The texts point to Exodus 14, the crossing of the Red Sea, and Exodus 19 and 20, which is the massive, pivotal moment of receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai.
What is analytically fascinating here is the specific lens through which they view Moses.
How so?
In many traditional frameworks, Moses is viewed almost exclusively as the strict, rigid lawgiver. He's the guy who comes down the mountain with heavy stone tablets, ready to enforce the rules and punish the wrongdoers.
Right, he's the enforcer.
But the BABASHUVA text intentionally frames him differently. They view him as the ultimate connector.
The text explicitly says he cares for the welfare of the people and strengthens the connection between the people and God.
They describe him as a leader who perfectly balances justice and compassion. He bridges the massive gap between the terrifying divine presence on the mountain and the flawed human beings down in the camp.
Yes, and this connects directly back to their thesis about the Torah of Moses being the uncorrupted operating system.
Exactly. Moses is presented as the archetype of someone who deeply understands that the law does not exist merely for the sake of having rules.
The law exists to serve the ultimate good of the people.
He ensures that the divine commandments are not wielded as arbitrary weapons, but are utilized as practical tools for maintaining a just, compassionate, functioning society.
He leads with a moral clarity that protects the vulnerable, while simultaneously keeping the entire community tethered to the divine source.
That makes perfect sense. He's like the ultimate project manager, making sure the software actually serves the users.
But I have to say, the third archetype is the one that completely hijacked my brain.
Oh, Rebecca.
It's Rebecca, and she is framed in these texts as the ultimate unprompted giver.
The narrative they cite here is from Genesis 24, and it is perhaps the most perfect distillation of their entire philosophy in action.
Let's set the scene for this, because the physics of this story are just wild. You have Eliezer, who is Abraham's senior servant. He has been sent on a massive, arduous journey back to Abraham's homeland to find a suitable wife for Isaac.
A very high-stakes mission.
Eliezer arrives at a well outside a foreign city. He is exhausted, and he has with him a caravan of 10 camels.
10 camels. That is the crucial detail.
He prays for a very specific sign. He basically says to God, "Let the young woman who comes out to the well and offers to water not just me, but also my camels, be the right one."
It is a highly specific and, frankly, highly demanding test of character.
Very demanding. And then Rebecca appears. The BABASHUVA text highlights her exact response. She bestows profound grace and compassion when she voluntarily gives water to Eliezer and, crucially, to his camels.
I cannot emphasize the camels enough here.
I know. We really have to unpack the biology and the physics of what she actually did. Drawing a pitcher of water from a well and handing it to a tired old man is a lovely thing to do. That is basic, decent human hospitality. It checks the box.
But offering to draw water for an entire caravan of 10 camels.
Exactly. If you look up the biology of a camel, a thirsty camel that has just crossed a desert can drink up to 30 gallons of water in a matter of minutes.
30 gallons. per camel.
10 camels means we're talking about drawing roughly 300 gallons of water by hand from a deep, ancient well using a single clay pitcher.
It is an almost incomprehensible amount of grueling, back-breaking physical labor. It would have taken hours of relentless effort.
And she did it for a total stranger, a dusty traveler who had not even asked her to do it. She offered.
This is why BABASHUVA holds her up as the ultimate, shining, undeniable example of cheesed grace.
It is the absolute definition of maximum effort with zero expected reward. She didn't know this guy was secretly rich. She didn't know he had gold bracelets hidden in his pack.
She just looked at a tired man and a bunch of thirsty animals, and she went to work until the job was done.
The BABASHUVA text explicitly notes that her action demonstrates the immense value of doing kindness and maintaining a radically generous heart, even toward entirely unrecognized people.
She did not perform this act for social clout. She did it because the need existed.
This narrative proves that the pillars of compassion and grace are not modern inventions. They are deeply embedded in the oldest, most foundational narratives of the tradition.
Rebecca is the living embodiment of the unprompted, costly grace that BABASHUVA demands its modern followers emulate.
Okay, so if we take a breath and look at the structure we've built so far, we have the deep theory, divine, spiritual humanism.
We have the 4 behavioral pillars: love, acceptance, compassion, and grace.
And we have the ancient role models, Abraham, Moses, and Rebecca. It paints an incredibly demanding, beautiful picture.
It does.
But this brings us to the operational reality, the friction of daily life. How does a regular person, someone listening to this deep dive right now, actually execute this? How do you run this software on a random Tuesday morning in 2026?
The BABASHUVA texts are surprisingly pragmatic and highly structured regarding the daily mechanics. They break down the execution into 2 distinct, interconnected axes.
Okay, what are they?
First, there is the vertical relationship methods for achieving closeness to God. Second, there is the horizontal relationship methods for strengthening moral values within human society.
Let's start with the vertical axis, because this is where the strictness of the Torah of Moses really kicks in.
Yes, the texts prescribe very specific traditional methods for achieving this divine closeness. It involves a mandate for deep, continuous Torah study.
They outline setting up structured courses, intensive workshops, expert lectures, and intimate small group studies.
They also heavily emphasize strict adherence to the mitzvot, the daily commandments.
The texts explicitly list keeping Shabbat, the Sabbath day of rest-observing kosher dietary laws, engaging in daily prayer, and actively participating in religious ceremonies.
And with the prayer, there's a specific emphasis on prayer of the heart, meaning deep intention, not just reciting words.
So the vertical axis is extremely traditional. It is a rigorous, demanding adherence to the ancient codes of behavior regarding human interaction with the divine.
It requires a massive time commitment and strict boundaries regarding what you eat and how you schedule your week.
But then we look at the horizontal axis, the moral values between people, and the texts break down 2 absolute required social ethics: justice, which in Hebrew is tzedek, and honesty, which is yasher.
And this is where the texts demand rigorous, uncompromising application in the public sphere.
Under the banner of justice, tzedek, the text does not settle for a passive suggestion, to be fair.
No, it calls for the active development of a fair legal system. More importantly, it explicitly mandates standing up for the rights of the weak and actively working to promote social and economic justice in the broader community.
It literally mandates standing up for the rights of the weak. That is an active kinetic requirement. You cannot just sit in your house and be just. You have to go out and enforce justice.
Exactly. And under the banner of honesty, Yosher, the text demands absolute, unwavering integrity in all spheres of life, public and private.
It lists keeping promises, maintaining strict honesty in business transactions, and completely avoiding any form of fraud, deception, or lies.
It calls for building every human relationship on a rock-solid foundation of mutual trust and respect.
I was thinking about the implications of this. If we extrapolate from the intensely serious tone of these texts, in the BABASHUVA worldview, a shady business deal is not just a white-collar misdemeanor.
It isn't just a legal issue at all.
Because they explicitly link this horizontal morality directly to the vertical relationship with God, cheating a customer or lying on a contract is treated as a direct, aggressive affront to the divine.
It is equally as severe, if not more so, than breaking the Sabbath or eating non-kosher food.
Because the 2 axes are inseparable. If you recall Pillar 2, Every single person is created in the image of God.
Therefore, if you defraud a person, if you exploit a worker, if you lie to a customer, you are directly disrespecting and abusing the divine image.
The vertical and the horizontal are completely interlocked. You cannot claim to have achieved closeness to God while simultaneously engaging in unjust or dishonest behavior toward your fellow human beings.
If you try to do both, the system crashes.
The hypocrisy breaks the code. Okay, so we have established a framework that is incredibly heavy. It requires rigorous intellectual study, strict dietary adherence, rigid schedule management for the Sabbath, and absolute unflinching moral clarity in business and social justice.
This is a massive lifestyle overhaul.
It is, which makes the next part of these documents so incredibly fascinating. Because just when you think you have this movement figured out as a strict, internally focused religious sect, the source material takes a wildly unexpected turn.
We move from the foundational theology into what they call the expansion documents.
Yes, the expansion documents. This is where the new reality part of their tagline is fully operationalized.
These documents detail exactly how BABASHUVA plans to integrate their ancient, rigorous operating system into the chaotic, fragmented reality of modern 21st century culture.
And I'm going to be honest, when I read these expansion plans, I was deeply skeptical. Because they look like they were written by a Silicon Valley tech incubator, not a tourist study group.
It's quite a shift in tone.
Let's look at their first category, social justice and radical empathy. We already talked about their mandate to stand up for the weak. And they list standard community projects, food drives, clothing collection campaigns for the needy.
That is all standard, expected religious charity.
But then I turned the page, and I hit a mandate that completely derailed my understanding of this group.
The asylum seekers?
Yes. The text explicitly mandates providing support for marginalized populations, and it specifically, explicitly names providing assistance to asylum seekers.
That is a highly specific, highly charged demographic to target for assistance.
I have to admit, I was blown away by the cognitive dissonance here. Let's be real about the modern landscape. You do not usually see strict, uncompromising, orthodox-leaning Torah observance paired in the exact same sentence with progressive, highly complex sociopolitical goals like global asylum seeker advocacy.
In the modern world, those two concepts usually exist on completely opposite ends of the cultural spectrum.
Right. People who are deeply concerned with ancient dietary laws are rarely the same people organizing trauma support for international refugees. How do they justify this synthesis? Is it just a PR move to look modern?
It is not a PR move. It is the logical, unavoidable conclusion of their own theology. It is a direct, unfiltered, modern application of the Abraham archetype we just discussed.
Oh, the guy in the tent.
Exactly. Think about the mechanism. If Abraham's primary mandate, the behavior that made him the model of divine humanism, was to run out into the blistering heat of the desert to welcome, protect, and feed the unknown stranger, what is the modern equivalent?
The modern desert is the global displacement crisis.
The modern stranger is the asylum seeker. BABASHUVA is taking an ancient narrative and demanding its literal mechanical application today, entirely regardless of the contemporary political optics or the cultural friction it might cause.
Wow. So they are completely bypassing modern political tribalism and going straight to the theological source code. Abraham fed the stranger. Therefore, we must assist the refugee.
The logic is bulletproof if you accept the premise.
And they push it even further. Under this same heading, they have a comprehensive section on trauma support.
Yes, the trauma support is fascinating.
The text details developing physical and psychological support programs specifically for victims of trauma. They explicitly mandate providing professional psychological counseling and structured rehabilitation activities.
This is where we see the ancient concept of Kemla compassion, which they defined as empathetic listening being upgraded with modern methodologies.
They are acknowledging a profound reality that human suffering in the 21st century often requires highly professional, structured psychological rehabilitation.
You cannot just offer a pat on the back and a prayer and consider the job done. True Temla requires utilizing the best available modern tools to heal the divine image.
We need the hardware running smoothly so the software can operate. Okay, that makes sense. But if the asylum seeker surprised me, this next expansion category completely broke my brain.
Holistic health and art.
Yes. Let's talk about holistic health and art. I was tracking with their theology right up until I hit their wellness mandate. The text explicitly mentions organizing physical activities designed to combine the health of the body and the mind.
And the specific examples they print in their own documents are yoga and tai chi.
Alongside comprehensive fitness workshops, mental health counseling, and nutritional advice for maintaining a balanced lifestyle.
Yoga and Tai Chi.
Yoga and Tai Chi. In a project absolutely dedicated exclusively to the strict Torah of Moses. I need you to help me bridge this gap, because historically there has been massive theological tension between Orthodox monotheism and Eastern spiritual practices.
There certainly has.
How on earth are they justifying yoga?
Okay.
Are they not worried about importing foreign religious concepts into their pristine operating system?
That is a highly astute question, and it points to the sophisticated nature of their framework. How do they justify it? It routes directly back to their foundational concept of holistic humanism and B'Tselem Elohim.
The image of God concept again.
Right. If you truly believe that the human being, body and mind, is created in the exact image of God, then caring for the physical and mental health of that biological vessel is not just a good idea, it is a strict religious imperative.
It is maintenance of the divine temple.
What BABASHUVA is doing is highly pragmatic. They are willing to look at practices originating from entirely different cultures, like the physical postures of yoga or the breathing techniques of Tai Chi, and evaluate them purely on their mechanical efficacy.
Okay, so if those physical practices are proven to effectively reduce stress, lower blood pressure, and maintain the health and mental balance of the human being.
BABASHUVA is willing to extract the physical utility of the practice, strip away its original theological context, and import it into their own framework.
So they're essentially reverse engineering Eastern wellness. They're saying the stretching and the breathing work, it keeps the human body healthy. And since God commanded us to keep the human body healthy, we're going to use this tool, but we're going to run it on the Torah operating system.
Precisely. They are prioritizing the health of the divine image over cultural purity. And we see the same pragmatism in how they approach the arts.
The expansion texts outline a mandate for organizing art exhibitions, music concerts, and theater productions to convey the messages of the project.
They specifically mention hosting creative workshops where participants can express their internal feelings and complex ideas through artistic mediums.
Because they recognize that sitting in a room intellectually studying an ancient text is only one pathway to human development. Art, music, physical movement. These are deeply primal, profoundly human ways of processing spiritual friction and projecting values out into the community.
They are acknowledging the full spectrum of the human experience.
Okay, let's look at the next expansion category: interface, dialogue, and education. We've already established through their pillars that they have a very wide tent regarding human acceptance. But this takes it to a highly structural level.
It does. They outline plans for early childhood education, specifically mandating the development of programs that teach love and respect from a very young age.
They want curriculums focused on tolerance, empathy, and conflict resolution for children.
They also detail the creation of couples and family therapy workshops. These are designed to strengthen domestic relationships based on the core values of love, deep understanding, and mutual respect.
They're trying to build the new reality starting inside the individual home.
But the most striking operational mandate in this section is their absolute commitment to interfaith and intercultural dialogue.
The text explicitly demands the creation of forums for interreligious and intercultural discussion. The stated aim is to encourage mutual understanding and active cooperation.
Furthermore, it calls for the initiation of joint, boots-on-the-ground projects that bring people from vastly different backgrounds together for volunteer work or artistic creation.
This is a vital architectural point to analyze. Let's look at the friction here. You have a group that is hyper-focused on an incredibly strict adherence to its own specific ancient text, the Torah of Moses.
Usually, groups with that level of internal strictness isolate themselves. They build compounds. They withdraw from the corrupted world.
But BABASHUVA is doing the exact opposite.
Yeah.
They are simultaneously mandating cooperative structural forums with people of completely different competing faiths.
They're actively seeking out dialogue and shared physical labor with the outside world. This proves that their second pillar, Kabbalat Ha'adam, the acceptance of humankind, is not just warm internal rhetoric to make themselves feel good. It is an external operational mandate.
They don't want to build a bunker. They want to work alongside everyone else in the city to build this new reality. It is an incredibly confident theology. They aren't afraid that talking to someone of another faith is going to corrupt their code.
Exactly.
Okay, we have reached the final expansion category: tech and the environment. I like to call this section the future-proofing.
An apt title. Let's examine their digital infrastructure first.
The text outlines a massive push into digital space. They specifically want to create what they call spiritual apps. The documents mention developing mobile applications to assist individuals in deepening their daily spiritual connection.
They're talking about building apps for guided meditation, structured daily prayer, and remote Torah study.
They also plan to produce vast amounts of digital media podcasts, video content designed to provide inspiration and practical tools for living a spiritual life.
And their ambitions go beyond mere content delivery. They aim to build entirely new virtual communities.
The text explicitly discusses creating global online platforms that allow people from all over the world to seamlessly participate in live discussions, virtual classes, and synchronized events.
They want to utilize digital collaboration platforms, forums, specialized discussion groups, and proprietary social networks to facilitate teamwork and shared learning among community members globally.
Now, I have to push back here again. We talked earlier about the danger of the teachings of man. We talked about how the internet is basically a machine designed to generate non-constructive criticism and judgment, the very things their first pillar forbids.
It is a hazardous environment for their values.
How does a movement obsessed with returning to a pure, uncorrupted, ancient source code justify building iPhone apps and social networks? Isn't a smartphone the ultimate distraction from the divine? How does an app not just become another layer of static?
That is the danger of the medium. But again, we have to look at their methodology. They view technology neutrally. A smartphone is not inherently evil. I mean, it is just a tool.
Right.
Just as Moses utilized stone tablets to deliver the code to a localized group of people in a desert, BABASHUVA believes they must utilize digital servers to deliver the framework to a globally dispersed population.
Okay, so the delivery mechanism changes, but the code remains the same.
If their goal is to provide a methodology for direct connection, ignoring the digital space would be intellectual malpractice. They are attempting to colonize the digital landscape with their framework.
They want to build a digital architecture that facilitates ahava and cheesed rather than outrage and isolation.
It is a massive gamble, but it is entirely consistent with their belief that the original code can operate on any hardware.
We are going to build a social network, but we are going to hardwire it so you can't post non-constructive criticism. Good luck to the developers on that one.
Indeed.
And finally, we have their approach to the physical world, the environment. The BABASHUVA texts place a massive, undeniable focus on environmental sustainability. They call for the initiation of green projects.
The specific, tangible example they mandate is the creation of community gardens.
These gardens are aimed at encouraging the growing of organic food, fostering local cooperation, and promoting active environmental protection.
They also mandate the integration of comprehensive sustainability education into local schools and community centers. The goal is to raise fundamental awareness about the critical importance of protecting the earth.
So if we pull back and look at the whole board, we have a strict, rigorously Torah-observant movement that is simultaneously building global meditation apps, teaching Eastern yoga postures, running organic community gardens, providing psychological trauma therapy, and fighting for the legal rights of asylum seekers.
It is quite the synthesis.
Can you synthesize this massive, contradictory web for us? How does all of this actually fit together into a single, cohesive movement without tearing itself apart?
If we look at the totality of these documents, from the deep theology of the pillars to the pragmatic mechanics of the expansions, BABASHUVA is attempting something remarkable. They are attempting to prove their core thesis not through debate, but through physical action.
By actively engaging with Tai Chi, digital podcasting networks, organic farming, and highly charged social justice issues like asylum support, they are making a profound, lived-in argument.
They are arguing that the Torah of Moses is not a fragile, dusty, historical artifact that needs to be kept under protective glass in a museum. They believe it is a living, breathing, endlessly robust framework.
And more importantly, they are betting their entire movement on the belief that when this ancient framework is finally stripped of centuries of accumulated human interference, it is entirely capable of adapting to, confronting, and ultimately healing the most complex, terrifying ailments of modern society.
They aren't retreating from the 21st century. They are charging directly into it, attempting to redeem the modern world using the tools of antiquity.
They're taking the absolute oldest code and proving it can run the newest, most complex hardware seamlessly.
Precisely. It is a breathtakingly ambitious architectural plan for human society.
Well, that brings us to the end of our exploration of these documents today. We have covered a truly massive amount of intellectual and practical ground.
We certainly have.
To briefly recap the sheer dizzying scope of the BABASHUVA vision, we started by pressing the theological factory reset button, wiping away the teachings of man to return to the raw Torah of Moses.
We examined the paradoxical engine of divine spiritual humanism.
We explored the heavy demands of the four pillars: love without judgment, universal acceptance of the divine image, empathetic compassion, and zero return grace.
We looked at the ancient archetypes, Abraham sprinting into the desert heat, Moses balancing law and empathy, and the sheer back-breaking grace of Rebecca hauling hundreds of gallons of water for those thirsty camels.
And we traced how they planned to expand those ancient blueprints outward into the modern world, culminating in organic community gardens, psychological trauma therapy, and digital meditation apps. It is, without a shadow of a doubt, a comprehensive, staggering blueprint for a new reality.
It forces the reader to look at ancient religious texts not merely as historical literature or restrictive rule books, but as highly potent, highly adaptable architecture for designing the future.
And so, to you, the listener, I want to ask you to take a moment and reflect on your own internal operating system. Whether you consider yourself deeply religious, entirely secular, or somewhere in the murky, questioning middle, we all have a baseline code that drives our daily actions and our moral judgments.
How do you currently balance your oldest, most foundational beliefs with the constantly shifting, high-speed, demanding realities of the modern world?
When your system encounters a bug, when you face a moral crisis, or profound isolation, or cultural friction, does your internal software just need a minor patch? Or, if you're being brutally honest with yourself, does it need a complete factory reset?
It is a grueling, necessary question to ask oneself periodically. Are the foundational structures we rely upon still actually serving their original intended purpose, or have they been entirely buried under our own accumulated modifications?
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you step back out into your own reality today. We spent a lot of time talking about how BABASHUVA wants to build a new world. We talked about apps and trauma therapy and global networks.
But the most striking thing about their entire philosophy isn't the technology or the social programs or the yoga classes.
No, it is their underlying fundamental assumption about where a true societal revolution actually begins. The BABASHUVA texts firmly believe that a new reality does not start with a brilliantly coded new app.
It doesn't start with a sweeping new political policy or a brilliant piece of legislation.
It starts with the absolute oldest, most difficult technology we have as a species. It starts with a radical, uncompromising, unprompted act of exhausting kindness directed toward a total stranger who cannot pay you back.
It starts with looking at a thirsty traveler in the desert and voluntarily drawing the water for the camels when absolutely nobody asked you to.
A profoundly challenging reminder of where real, sustainable change always originates. The only question left is, are we brave enough and strong enough to actually build our reality on that? Keep diving deep. We will catch you on the next one.